Scared is Better brings you the key to everything. I studied biology until after midnight. The crick in my back told me I had fallen asleep with my book again. I glanced down at my phone and realized I only had 10 minutes to get to school. 12 years were about to end, and I could hear my mom's voice, finish strong. It had been our mantra since junior year when I realized my GPA, my foreign language work, and my charity hours had put me in contention for valedictorian. The test was over by 12:30. I waited for an update on my phone. My whole body felt electric. I tried to divert my attention and found myself back on the Columbia website. I tapped the civil engineering degree and dreamed of my acceptance letter. Bridges, freeways, and enormous projects that I would build. But I couldn't help but look at the map. Columbia was only 50 miles from West Point, where Scott Weaver had gone last year. He wasn't my boyfriend, but he took me to prom, and dancing under the silver lights was enough to make me dream. I want to focus on college, he said, and then the Marine Corps. I never quite recovered from the way he looked at me, so I'll only text you good night so we can both keep focused. I'll be home for graduation, if you'll have me. I was about to tap on graduation dresses when my phone lit up. Final score bio. I took a breath and opened it. 96% class rank number 1. I almost dropped my phone. I started to dial mom when it rang. Is it over? Mom, 96% first overall. He let out a breath. I'm so proud of you, Laney. Then her voice shifted. I have something to tell you. Great Nana passed away last night. It landed cold. He lived a long life. He did, I said. Mom, are you okay? Lived a good life. Mom's voice quavered. We need to get her things. I'll meet you there. Silver Springs was where Great Nana had spent the last 2 years of her life. Her room was neat and tidy. We gathered her belongings, her photo album, her jewelry, her digital frame still glowing with a picture of me and Mom at Halloween. We donated her clothes, but I kept her cardigan. A nurse knocked. I'll miss her, she said softly. Her smile and all of her stories. I felt like we hadn't visited as much as we should, and the guilt began to settle in. Miss Grace was happy, the nurse said gently. Don't be cruel to yourself. It was a beautiful end. Mom nodded, lifting the tote. Yes, it was a beautiful life. The nurse hesitated. There is one other thing. The other thing was a tabby cat bigger than a chihuahua. He trotted in the moment the door opened and hopped on the bed. He started talking immediately, like he was explaining everything. Mom said no at first. The nurse pressed. He has nowhere to go. There's no one else. He'll go to a shelter. He hesitated. And he can't stay here. The residents think that if he sleeps on your bed 3 nights in a row, that maybe he knows. I spied the elderly woman listening at the door, her face staring at the cat. My mom raised an eyebrow. Knows what? The nurse looked uncomfortable. He knows, when someone is going to pass away. The nurse gave a small shrug. He was Miss Gracie's cat. My mom rolled her eyes at the psychic, doom-predicting cat. I reached out and petted him, and he pushed his striped head into my hand. Does he have a name? We call him Key, because he can get into anything. I let Key rest his little paws on my shoulder as I walked to the car. A quick glance back showed me the faces of the residents staring out the window. Their faces looked relieved. My mom bought a litter box, food, toys. That night, I studied world history. My books covered my bed, and Key napped nearby, purring. I read aloud. Sometimes he answered in a meow. At 11, I carried him to the family room, and he curled up on the couch, and I went to bed. I woke up at 6, and Key was sitting on my bed on my history book. My door was still shut. I stared at him in disbelief. Did I wake up in the night and open the door? I checked the latch, shut up tight. I told myself it meant nothing. The very next day, I had the house to myself. Mom called me after noon. How's the psychic doom cat? I laughed with her because the weirdness of the morning had worn off. My eyes were heavy-lidded, and I found myself reading the same paragraph about World War I 3 times before I decided it was time to turn in. He had been laying on the desk, his paws stretched out, and a satisfied look on his face. I felt a little guilty as I swooped him up and put him outside the door. His whiskered face looked shocked, and I told him good night. He warbled an angry meow, and I tried to ignore it, as I shoved my history book out of the way and laid down. I even dreamed about World War One, bombs exploding, the long lines of barbed wire. In the dream, I was in the trenches, and as I frantically searched for a rifle, I found there were hundreds of tabby cats screaming at me. The cats tripped me as I tried to run, all the time yowling, the bomb sirens wailing. Every time I found a weapon, it was a tabby's tail. I woke up and I realized it was not a bomb siren. It was my alarm on my phone. But the yowling, that was real. He was sitting on a small stack of books, meowing at me, making full eye contact. The door was still locked. My blood ran cold and my brain screamed, "This is day 2." There was a strange dissociation as I pulled on my shirt and hurried out the door. I didn't even want to move him or touch him. A wave of revulsion hit me as I had to retrieve my history book, and he laid a silvery paw on my fingers. I went over these facts again and again sitting in my car. I realized I was gripping the steering wheel, and the clock now read 8:15. I was late, and I had been contemplating this cat for 20 minutes. I started the car and looked up at the house, only to see Key with his paw against the window, soundlessly. His mouth moved. I vowed to only study for an hour that night. When Scott messaged me good night at 7 p.m., I was already sleepy. That night, I put Key outside the door and I locked everything. Patio door, windows, alarm system, armed. If anything opened, the whole neighborhood would know. I didn't even trust myself to sleep in my room. I took a blanket and I curled up on the couch. There were no nightmares, no alarm. It was Saturday, and I didn't even have to get up for school. I knew immediately that the alarm company hadn't woken me up, which made me feel relieved the moment I opened my eyes. I saw that Mom had called, and I reminded myself to call her back. But that's when I heard it, a chittering good morning meow. On the other side of the couch, where my empty book bag had spilled its contents, sat Key. His tail whipped up and down. "Is it me?" I heard myself say. "Is it?" He pawed at the books and meowed back. I backed away, circling the room. "I thought you liked me." He kept talking, kneading his soft paws into my book. I grabbed the keys and I ran for the door. It flew open. The alarm screamed. My mom stood there, crying so hard he couldn't choke out words. "What's happening?" I screamed, but her eyes were blank and wide as she continued to mutter and gasp and cry. I couldn't understand her. She reached for the remote. She clicked on the TV, and there were emergency broadcast banners, and the president was apparently getting ready to do a broadcast from Air Force One. I stopped breathing as I read the banner. Wormwood, pushed off course, impact, 1 hour EST. We are EST. Wormwood was the asteroid that should have been visible from Earth next week. Suddenly, the anchors were breaking in with a live broadcast. "We will stay with you as long as we can." The pretty dark-haired news lady had her head in her hands. She was pale, and her mascara was beginning to run. The older newsman reached out for her, hugged her tight, so we could hear their clothes muffled as the microphone bounced. They were weeping and holding each other. The anchor tried to recover. "Wormwood is spinning out of control, and it may be sooner. We will stay with you." The shock made me reread the banners again. I looked over at Mom, who was now stupefied with shock, shuddering, weeping as she held my shoulder. I couldn't breathe. I read it again and again, and then I looked at Key, and I saw that he was sitting on my history book. He wasn't on the couch. He hadn't been on my bed. He had been on my history book. The book that had a full-color glossy photo of Earth on the cover. The cover where he now sat, tapping the earth, looking at me with his paw in the air, meowing mournfully at me.